at verse 25.
And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to the test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live." But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back.' Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" He said, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "You go and do likewise."
You may be seated. Water has always been a major issue that we've had in California, and we heard this week maybe the Sites Reservoir will begin be worked on next year, maybe. But you know, we all need water, and finding water is always kind of a trick. We have friends who are dozers. You know what they are? The people who walk around with a stick and they come to the right place and the stick goes down and they find water. Did any of you ever do that? You have. I can't. I'll let you know that. My brother could. He could find, and the stick would go down so many times, and you'd say, "This is how deep the water is underneath." I can't do it. I simply can't. Nancy probably can, but I can't. I put the brass rods in my hands with the holders so they run freely, and they just stay there. I don't know what they do, but they just stay there. Well, a fellow needed to find water. He was in Vermont. He bought a piece of property. He needed to find water for his house. And so he called on a local dowser to come and find water. And so he came out and he said, "Man, on this field coming down," he said, "you have a river flowing and underneath you right here. Dig down 10 feet with a backhoe, fill it, have that water fill in, empty it the next day, do it every day, empty it. It fills up, empty it, fills up." He did that for a week. He said, "Great." So he got a well driller and he put the well down, and he forgot he had water. He thought it was great. Built his house, went to turn on electric and on the pump, and there was nothing. The well was dry. He couldn't figure it out, so he went to the dowser and he said, "What's going on here? You know, you said I had a river. I have nothing in my well." He said, "Did you empty it every day?" And he said, "No, I had it for a week or so." "You had to empty it every day. You had to empty it because, you see, there are little capillaries in that field of water that's running through, and they're going to a spot that's open. But when you blocked it again, it found other ways for the water to go. So now you have a dry well." The important fact is that you have to keep the well going all the time, emptying it and it fills, emptying it and it fills. That's the point that we have here about this story of who is your neighbor. The story of the Good Samaritan is about the issue of who my neighbor is. And tied deeply is that of caring. But caring for a neighbor can be difficult. It can be time-consuming, can be costly. And we're tempted to say, let the government do it. Let somebody else do it. And unfortunately, we can have a dry well of our souls. Our state, unfortunately, has the highest rate of homelessness in the nation. And there are a number of reasons for that. I'm not going into that. I bring this up because there is such a need of helping others. We see it every week. You go down Cypress, you'll see somebody with a sign, anything will help, or vet hungry, whatever it might be. If somehow drawing upon your compassion to help those people. But are they really in that situation that we should do that? Last week we had a gentleman came after the service and he wanted me to put him up in a hotel. I asked him, I said, you know, we work with a rescue mission. He said, oh, they kicked me out. Well, you know what? I don't necessarily have to put you up for now. You know, you've already had those resources and you violated their rules. That's why I think we need to look at this carefully of what the Good Samaritan is all about. So let the setting of this. First of all, let me just tell you in theology, this has a little special place. It starts with the words, and we read them very carefully, on one occasion. This is like if you've ever played Legos, you know, or with your grandkids, or my son still plays Legos, and he's in his 50s, you know. Legos can be placed any place, you know, they're little building blocks. Well, this story may not necessarily fit in exactly the time frame, but Luke uses it here to point out something very important. And we have to go back to chapter 10, and you go back to verse 19, and Jesus talking about you'll be able to step on snakes and scorpions and overcome powers of the enemy. And this is a sneaky way that the enemy is coming at Jesus. He's confronted in a sneaky way. And it comes by a scribe who is extremely intelligent, well-documented man, has degrees, studies the law all the time. So the question comes to Jesus by the scribe, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And we have to remember that the scribes talked about the minutiae of the details of the law, the little tiny things. And in Matthew chapter 15, verse 8, Jesus said, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. And really what you're looking at here is, this man is saying, give me a list. What is your list so I can get into heaven? What must I do? Do I stand on a street corner handing out paper? Do I go on a missions trip? What must I do? Give me the list. And so Jesus returns the question. Then he asks this gentleman, he says, what's written in the law? How do you read it? How do you interpret it? And man's reply is from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5, which is part of the Jewish Shema. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and your neighbor, and with your strength and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's good. That's acceptable. But then the expert is hung up on that word, love as yourself. Just as you love yourself, so you should love your neighbor. And here comes, how do I work that out? Verse 29 says, to justify himself. The only way he can justify himself is to limit the extent of the law's demand upon him. I got to limit, that's too tough. I got to water it down. So he says to Jesus, so who's my neighbor? And Jesus gives this parable. Its location is the Jericho Road. I've seen the Jericho Road. It starts at Jerusalem, it's 3,500 feet above sea level, and it goes down to Jericho, which is 1,300 feet below sea level. 20 miles between the two, down to what we know today as the Great Rift Valley. And coming down that area, it's eroded. I mean, great erosion takes place. If you've ever been to Bryce Canyon, you understand what we're talking about. You know, just narrow confines. And it was a robber's haven going down this road. You didn't go down that road at night. You didn't go by yourself. You always went with a group. There was safety in numbers. There's happy hunting ground for those others. So Jesus is referring to this road, and that thieves and robbers were often operating there. It was often called the Bloody Way or Bloody Alley. So the traveler comes, and we don't know why he's traveling by himself. Maybe he was trying to catch up with the party that was ahead of him. We were in Israel, and we were up on this game preserve in Gehenna, and there was a sign that says, "Stay in your group, lepers are reported here." And I looked, I took a picture of the sign, and then I saw Nancy, she's about that big down there, and I said, oh, I better hurry up. I'm by myself. So maybe I better hurry up, and maybe this guy's saying, I've got to hurry up and catch him. Or maybe he was just foolish in thinking, I got to get to Jericho before it's over. But he falls to the robbers, and they beat him up. Maybe he was just foolish, and there's no one to blame but himself. How often I've passed by someone who obviously got himself into a pickle. In fact, I don't think there's a week that goes by when somebody wants help. They don't want to change their behavior, just help them when they have problems. Their life is a result of bad decisions they've made. However, my heart breaks when I see people who obviously have need. I was in Sacramento when I was pastoring in Sacramento a number of years ago. After the service, a lady came in, she drove up, her car was packed, her clothes. She came in and crying, and she was beaten up. Obviously, had black eyes, bruise on her face, had a little baby, and she's crying, and my friend Bob and I were talking to her and said, my boyfriend he was drunk and he beat me up. I want to go home. I want to go up to Oregon where my mom is. I've already called my mom, but I don't have any money for gas. And we looked at her and said, you also need some other help. So we gave her the money for the gas to get up to Oregon. I called my friend here in Redding who was going to help her some more as she continued up to Oregon. Obviously, she was in need. We gave her money for her baby, for materials that the baby would need. Obviously, my heart broke for her. I still think of her. She was in need, a great need. But then compare that to a guy who came to me the next day or next week or so and said, hey, pastor, you need to put me up. I'm a Christian. I don't want to go to the rescue mission. You need to put me up because I'm a Christian. I said, no, I don't. No, I don't. I don't need to do that. That's not the requirement here. You have a need or you're freeloading. Our heart has to go out to those who have real need. So who's the first guy that came by? Well, he was a priest. Priest, well, it's pretty good, but I want you to notice which direction he was going. If he was a priest and going to Jerusalem, he would have touched, if he touched a dead body or a wounded body, he would be considered unclean and couldn't fulfill his responsibilities in the temple. But he's going away down to Jericho. Oh, I can't touch him. I hope somebody helps him. But he passes by the far side. Then comes a Levite. Now, to be a priest, you have to be a Levite. But not all Levites are priests. Make that distinction. So here are these two religious people as such. So as this man comes close, this Levite comes close, he looks at this man and maybe he thought in his mind, maybe it's a trap. Maybe because bandits were in the habit of using decoys, and one of the gang would act like he's wounded and suddenly spring upon the man and beat them up. Perhaps the Levite had the motto of just saying, I'm going to play it safe. I can't help them. Now comes the Samaritan. And Jesus uses the Samaritan because that's the last person you would think is, from a Jewish standpoint, that would be your neighbor. He got his attention. When Jesus said he got this scribe's attention, a Samaritan came. He traveled this road apparently quite often. Now notice this man that had